Welcome to Politics and Psychology. Today we are discussing what about TikTok? Well, TikTok is a social media app that anyone can make an account, and a lot of younger people use this app. But there's also a lot of older people who use it, a lot of professionals who use it, including a lot of political officials who also use the app. You can do anything from wine tasting, church messages, political messages, TikTok challenges, dancing videos, etc. So you might have seen a lot of these TikTok challenges and dances during the pandemic because we had a lot of free time. So anyway, the reason why the US government is trying to ban TikTok is because of the allegations that TikTok is owned by a Chinese company. That company is called ByteDance, BYTE Dance. And the allegations are that because it's a Chinese-owned company, that they fear that they will interfere with our U.S. elections and that the app itself has content that is harmful to our children or to U.S. users because they fear it will pull out our privacy data and then exploit that or sell it to other countries, other adversaries, or anyone that would have any harm or intended harm for our country. So on April 24, 2024, President Joe Biden signed a bill that would ban TikTok if the Chinese company ByteDance did not sell the TikTok social platform to another company, preferably a U.S. company, or it did not separate itself from the Chinese government. On May the 7th, TikTok sued our government over the potential ban, and they called the law unconstitutional and saying that it was going against the user's rights to free speech, and it was also isolating one company and preventing that company from having exposure or freedom of speech itself to other users who are not only in our country but also throughout the world. And their specific language in the claim is, quote, "It subjects a single named speech platform to a permanent nationwide ban and bars every American from participating in a unique online community with more than 1 billion people worldwide." Now, this is the second attempt of the U.S. to ban TikTok. The first occurred under President Trump's administration, or former President Trump's administration. And using similar constitutional claims, that ban did not proceed and it was not passed into Congress. So now they are trying it again in 2024. So although there is no current law banning TikTok, there are many users, such as governments or universities, that have on their own banned TikTok, and they are preventing it from being used in state, local, and federal levels, or not allowed to have it on your phone if that phone is a work phone and that phone is for government funded or government related operations. And although we have the TikTok claim that we don't want to have interference by the Chinese government, we don't have any actual evidence that TikTok has been used to exploit user privacy or to extrapolate or take out our data to then use it to interfere with a presidential election. So if we don't have that situation, we don't have any proof of that, then what would be the reason for the ban? Well, there are lawmakers and intelligence officers who are concerned about the potential for harm for our country, which is what they should be doing, working on the offense rather than defense. And they claim that by TikTok's ownership being a China-based company, it could endanger the data of our U.S. citizens and the app users in the United States. And that's mostly due to a Chinese national security law that can force companies that are based in China to give them their data that they collect on any users of their apps or of their products. So that means that any users of TikTok, a Chinese-owned company, would then be required to then give back to the Chinese government any data they collect on us. So that would make sense. However, TikTok itself is based in Singapore, and it says that it doesn't store any U.S. information in China. And so TikTok CEO is arguing that, well, we're storing it in Singapore and no American data is stored in there, and nor do we have to give any information about U.S. to China because we don't even have that information on China's soil. But despite this, some lawmakers are worried that the Chinese government can still make TikTok give them the information about us and then either conduct surveillance of our American activities, our government activities, or even conduct espionage against our government or against our political candidates or political elected officials. So you remember the bill did not pass the first time under the Trump administration. And so now what Senate is doing is they are packaging it in a new way and putting it into a foreign aid package that would include the TikTok ban if the TikTok Chinese-based company does not separate itself from ByteDance or does not sell itself within the 12 months. And this is one of the challenges that we will discuss here. And the reason why the language has been updated and some of the subclauses within that proposed bill have been introduced is because the one reason why TikTok was successful in going against the U.S. government and saying that it's unconstitutional to ban TikTok is because of the First Amendment, which provides for freedom of speech. And so because TikTok used the First Amendment against our country, then that's why the bill did not pass previously to then ban TikTok. So to avoid arguments against free speech, the newer proposed ban now appears in a bill about sanctions on Russia and Iran. And this separate bill would then prohibit or stop data brokers, people who are buying and selling data like our privacy data, like your user data when you go to a store app or a social media app. It's collecting all that information. And so this new bill would then not only prohibit or stop the data sellers or brokers from any of the apps used in our country, but would also stop them from transferring U.S. users' information to any foreign adversaries at that time. So it's part of a package on foreign aid or money to give to Ukraine, Israel, and Gaza. So what Congress did is that by combining the legislation and changing the language, they're now making it easier for senators to vote in favor of banning TikTok rather than being seen as being in favor of taking away Americans' First Amendment or freedom of speech. So it's important for us to pause for a second to see what's happening. The foundational issue is banning TikTok because of the perceived interference in U.S. elections, possible data mining, or taking our privacy information, selling it to other companies, or the Chinese government using it against us and conducting surveillance or espionage. So if that were the only case, then that could be a very solid argument. But because China came back, or TikTok came back with saying, oh no, this is a freedom of speech issue, then what Congress did was use language to now make it where, oh, well, you know what? Now it's all foreign entities that can be either for us or against us. And so if we put this TikTok ban and, squeeze it in between aid to Ukraine, aid to Israel and Gaza, then we can get you so focused on, oh, of course, we want to help stop the wars and stop the killings. And that makes TikTok seem so small compared to everything else. So they're doing that little magic trick where you can put the ball or the peanut under their cups on the street and you're moving it around. You don't really know what's where. And so they're still trying to get what they want passed, but making it where it seems more accessible and easier to digest to the general public than by just sticking to what it really is, which is wanting to ban TikTok. So it's passing it through or veiling it or covering it by other measures that we do care about, which is not having war and protecting children and innocent people, and then making that a global attack on foreign adversaries, and then making China, therefore, seen as a foreign adversary, with TikTok being a symptom or a tool of adversarial activity, which would go against U.S. elections or U.S. security. So let's get to the bill. The bill is H.R. 8038, and it's called 21st Century Peace Through Strength Act. So, with looking at political messaging, psychology of political messaging, if you look at century and peace through strength, these are words to get you to focus on the power of the American people, which is, of course, smart, focusing on the power of the American people. And of course, we want to support this bill because we want to be able to have peace and show American strength. And we also want to show solidarity and support and global peace by supporting the countries that are being disadvantaged or the underdog in the wars that they are experiencing. So I will include a link to this HR 8038 in the description of this episode, so you can look through that and read it for yourself. And with this bill, it passed this year 360 to 58, again, as part of a larger bill related to the sanctions or fines on foreign adversaries like Russia. So this is where the foreign adversary of China would come in. And so it's part of a package of foreign aid, so giving money to people that would need it, and also taking away money to people that we see as adversaries or who may indeed be adversaries. It also provides military aid to Ukraine and Israel and humanitarian aid to Gaza. And because these are very emergent crisis issues that are happening, then by pushing the TikTok bill in between urgent issues related to death, then it's going to make the bill have to be voted on very quickly, and therefore push the TikTok or the proposed TikTok ban through easier and with less resistance than if we thought it was only about freedom of speech. And the bill also includes updated language that TikTok would have to separate itself from ByteDance, which is the Chinese-owned company, either by selling it to someone else or separating from the Chinese government. Instead of having to do that within 6 months, they now have up to 12 months, which coincidentally allows TikTok to still be legal and operational throughout the 2024 presidential elections. And with the announcement of the revised language for the revised bill, then TikTok still responded that they are going to still take it back to the courts and say that it's unconstitutional and that they're going to fight the ban. So after the 2020 attempted ban, and in support of this 2024 attempted ban on TikTok, the DOJ, or the Department of Justice, has provided in their legal arguments information that they say would support the ban. And in one part of the report, they say that at least, quote, at least as of 2022, their software contained multiple internal search tools that had been developed and run by Chinese-based ByteDance engineers for scraping TikTok user data, including U.S. user data, end quote. The DOJ also wrote, quote, one of those tools allowed ByteDance and TikTok employees in the United States and China to collect bulk user information based on the user's content or expressions, including views on gun control, abortion, and religion, end quote. And in another section of the report, the DOJ said, quote, another tool contained policies that allowed both for the collection of bulk user information as well as the triggering of the suppression of content on the platform based on the user's use of certain words. Although this tool contains certain policies that only apply to users based in China, other such policies may have been used to apply to TikTok users outside of China, end quote. So, what the DOJ is saying that based off of their intelligence gathering information and reports, they did not find any actual instances of where the user data was being used to suppress or influence an election or data mining that would be used against the safety and security of citizens, but that it was possible based off of their infrastructure of TikTok, meaning their ability to do harm to our country. Part of the arguments for the TikTok ban are not only to protect the privacy data and the information for American users or those connected to government owned devices such as phones, computers, laptops, but also to specifically help protect the children and the young adults who are using these apps and being exposed to mind control like data or content that China would then be able to govern and control through their messaging and how they manipulate the algorithms to push certain content rather than other content. And that is a valid concern considering that TikTok has a different app in America or different content in America than what they do for TikTok in China. Now, the TikTok version for adults is pretty much the same, except for the Chinese based content for TikTok has more information of propaganda for the Chinese government and against their adversaries. And they also make it clear that there's an adult version versus a children or an youth version. But in America, they only give one app. So children and adults are exposed to the same content. And when you look at the Chinese app for children, their focus is less on silly things like challenges and twerking and more on educational content. So there is a concern that there is catered information to either dumb down American youth or to make them focus on information that's not going to help advance them, but also that could make them more vulnerable by being grouped in the same adult content and the same adult users and accounts. That could then make the children and youth vulnerable or more vulnerable to predators and pedophiles. So now let's take a closer look at the proposed TikTok ban for ourselves, meaning not just what Congress or the HR bill is saying, but also what we are seeing when we compare that to other behaviors or actions or legislation that's actually happening in our country. So the first concern, the disparity, the difference, is that if there is a concern for citizen safety and citizen online privacy for TikTok justified to be banned, then why are the same standards not also applied to Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, or even YouTube? So if China is, capable of selling our information and privacy data to third-party companies, that's also what is already happening with these same platforms, Twitter, Facebook, and all of that, to their third-party companies. When you click on to subscribe to a new social media platform or join an email list, they put in their disclaimer in their privacy notices that they have the right to then sell the information by you using their platform to their quote parties or third party partners, and that is them selling your information to another company. That third party company then sells your information to another company. So eventually it can be sold ultimately to China or to Russia. It just may have to go through a few more circuits. But if the government was truly concerned about our privacy and our privacy not being sold to third parties, then these same companies should also not be able to sell our data for the purposes of marketing, targeted ads, and these ads being for political reasons or just for giving you curated content, or even to sell for what you may like, and therefore companies that sell products or services can then more accurately target you as a potential consumer, client, or buyer. A second inconsistency is the arguments that TikTok is unsafe for our American youth. And for it to be more safe, then we have to ban TikTok so we can make it easier for parents to monitor what their children have access to. But that's definitely not the case, because even if you go to YouTube Kids, it's very hard for a parent to just delete the child's account or to screen what content would be allowed, what channels would be allowed, or without parental permission to access. For example, YouTube Kids is very easy to set up, and they aggressively target you and prompt you to sign up for YouTube Kids if they see that you are watching content for children, like a bunch of children videos or silly children songs. So it's very easy. Oh, you're watching this. You'll see an immediate pop up to sign up for YouTube Kids or sign up on the YouTube Kids app. So it's very easy to do, usually in just one click, other than putting in your name and picking out your avatar. But when you try to delete the account, because you see that you cannot easily moderate your own child's content or the ads that are being shown to your child, it's not that easy. One, you can sign up for YouTube Kids on your cell phone, on a tablet, on a computer, but you're only able to delete it by going onto a computer, going all the way down to the settings, then going to a subcategory for privacy, then going to another category for permissions, to then just ask to delete the account, then receiving another link to then say, yes, I want to delete this account. So if Congress is truly concerned about parents having control over the content, then they also should control and make it easier for parents to unsubscribe or to delete children accounts on social media platforms, whether it's on TikTok or not. And one of the reasons why parents are deleting the YouTube Kids account is because of the content. If you're focusing on conservative values or you don't want to push sexuality onto your children, then YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, all of those social media platforms have an algorithm to push this content regardless of what you may want. And so you can try to delete one channel, but it won't stop another channel that's similar from also popping up. So when parents try to delete the account altogether, it's very difficult to do. And the reason for that is that they want to keep their children safe. So if they're using that same logic for TikTok not being safe for the minds of children and teenagers, then Congress should also put in to our other platforms other safety measures to more accurately keep children safe. For example, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram have a huge presence for child pornography on each of their platforms. And even if you go and see an inappropriate and actual sexual abuse or child sexual abuse material, even if you go and try to click on this link to report it, or you try to send an email to customer service, they don't even respond, or they'll respond with, our platform is for all users and we embrace the freedom of speech, and our platforms embrace, quote, diverse viewpoints and interests. And I definitely know this to be a fact, not only from research, but from personal experience, in which I saw a parent sexually abusing her child. I reported the incident 3 times and was told each time that this is user-generated content and everyone is able to voice their own opinions and their preferences. So this was for Facebook. So clearly, even back then, they were not interested in keeping children safe, and there's much more of the use and presence of child pornography on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram, and yet nothing is being done by Congress to protect children from those apps either. This is even the case when the actual victims have had their childhood sexual abuse video recorded. They became adults, or their parents were able to find and locate the videos, and then instead of it being stopped or pulled down, often Facebook and Twitter specifically will refuse to remove the content. The only time that I saw a successful account was when there was a lawsuit or the threat of a lawsuit by Taylor Swift because her image was being used by AI generating child sexual abuse material to make her look younger than what she is as a child, and then to use her image to create subsequent child pornography videos. And so she was able to get her down, but not everyone is Taylor Swift. Also, we can see that Facebook and Instagram expose children and teenagers to sexual content, even when those children have not engaged with the app in a way that would make the algorithm click in to then start showing them explicit content. Facebook and Instagram also make it easy for sexual predators and pedophiles to track and target children and teens. And there are no privacy protections on either of these apps that prevent those predators from contacting the child or the teenager. And they often do this through the Messenger app feature or the direct messaging feature. And both often have the ability to just show explicit images to the child or pressure the child to do the same. And there's no protections or online safety protocols to prevent those children from being vulnerable or exposed to those pedophiles and predators, nor from stopping the pedophiles and predators from being able to easily track and target those youth. There was one undercover operation for internet crimes against children, and what they did was they made a fake account and made it to look like it was a 13-year-old girl in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and the fake name was Issa B. So they also created a fake mother and gave a fake Facebook account for Issa B's mother, and that mother was called Rosalind Sarasaras. And so what the investigation did was they created the fictional mother's profile, and they made her with constant content or constant posts that would give signals to pedophiles and human traffickers that she, Sarasaras, the fake Facebook mother, was interested in trafficking her daughter. So when you have Facebook, obviously you can see, well, who are you liking? Who are you following? So then the investigators, they set it up where they had the girl, Issa B's name as a contact connected to the mother, Rosalind. And so as expected, the men who could pick out the signals, or the traffickers who can pick out the signals of this mother wanting to traffic her attractive child, the 13-year-old child, by the way, they were able to actually connect with Issa B herself. This resulted in most of Issa's followers being males between the ages of 18 and 40, and with comments on Issa's post ranging from admiring, giving her gentle comments, to then giving very sexually explicit content and suggestive language, and sometimes even very threatening language and sexually abusive threats against her. Issa's account drew in thousands of adult followers, and in the Facebook messaging direct chat feature, which is the messenger, then that account received graphic sexual photos and videos no less than 3 to 4 times a week. And it was clear that this was a 13-year-old girl. It was clear that her mother was interested in trafficking her daughter. So if anyone who is interested in being a human trafficker, they can put out these cues and these signals that will attract other pedophiles, traffickers, and predators, and they were able to do this easily. In another Facebook investigation, an attorney general's office found that sexual content that involved children under the age of 13 was over 10 times more prevalent on Facebook as well as Instagram than it was on Pornhub and OnlyFans. So if our government or Congress is so concerned about the safety of children and teens and what they're exposed to through social apps such as TikTok, then why do they allow Facebook and Instagram to go unmonitored? Why are they also not threatening to ban Meta, or why are they not forcing the sale of Meta? Now, both Facebook and Instagram are owned by the CEO, Mark Zuckerberg, and again, part of the parent company called Meta Platforms, and simply known as Meta. Now, because of the child sexual abuse material on Facebook and Instagram, in January 2024, Zuckerberg testified and was questioned by Congress about the known child exploitation through his apps and Meta platform. But other than reprimands from the senators, nothing else was done after this in January. And in that same congressional hearing, the CEO of TikTok was also there. And he was also confronted and questioned. And they were specifically questioned about the child sexual exploitation and child online safety that was not being enacted to protect the youth on their platforms specifically. Other social media platforms were there as well, and they were also questioned. But of the social media CEOs who were questioned, the two most heavily questioned were Facebook CEO and the TikTok CEO, and their question about their high proportion of child sexual abuse material and exploitation on their sites. But despite being presented with this information, including objective evidence of numerical and quantitative data for how often this is occurring, when these two CEOs were asked to support the Kids Online Safety Act, neither Zuckerberg or the CEO for TikTok, who is Shou Chew, by the way, neither Zuckerberg or Chew agreed to support this act. And they said instead that it would be a violation of free speech. So if both Facebook and TikTok were both questioned, both had to testify before Congress at the same Senate congressional hearing at the same time, the same day, both for infractions against the safety of children, why is it then that only TikTok is being held accountable and threatened to be banned or forced to be sold and not Facebook? And even after all of this, and this is not the first time that social media platforms have had to testify or explain their actions for not keeping children safe, for not keeping teens and young adults safe online when using their platforms. Yet despite these years worth of debate and conversations and Senate hearings, to this date, no bills have been passed. There has been no meaningful legislation that was not just written and introduced, but none have been put into actual law. So we can see that even when we have congressional hearings, the highest, legislators in our land, why is it that, one, nothing is being done to protect our children, especially if we're saying that we're going to ban TikTok for the safety of our children? So what makes Zuckerberg different from the TikTok CEO? Is it because of Zuckerberg's wealth? So that's a third hypocrisy or difference in how they're presenting Facebook, social media, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, Google platform. They're being held to a different level of accountability than TikTok. So we could say that it's because TikTok is an issue of national security and to avoid election interference. And it is always a good argument to keep our country safe, to keep our citizens safe, our data and our information safe, and to definitely keep our elections safe and fair. And one of the reasons to support TikTok being banned is, again, because it's under the control of the Chinese government, and that Chinese government requires not only a portion of the proceeds made from ad revenue from on TikTok or any of the platforms that are based in China, but it also requires those social media platforms in China, based in China, or on China's land to then be able to turn over the user or the consumer's data, which then would make us vulnerable as U.S. citizens. And to avoid China invading in the privacy of Americans and to avoid China interfering with our U.S. elections, then banning TikTok would then prevent the Chinese government from having access to our private information or any U.S. citizen who uses the TikTok app. And it would be fair to assume that no country, not our country, would want any other country interfering with our elections. But if we look at the argument of keeping our elections fair and safe, then we also have to look at the roles of our own platforms and how they have been used or tools for other countries interfering with our election. In 2017, executives from Facebook, Google, and Twitter appeared on Capitol Hill to publicly explain their role in Russia's influence on our 2016 presidential election and how their social media apps were used to spread misinformation. And there was a heavier emphasis on exploring the ads and the ad revenue on Facebook because the main ads that were purchased were from a company associated with Vladimir Putin of Russia, and it consistently gave misinformation in a way that was used to positively portray the former President Donald Trump, or at that time the candidate for presidency, Donald Trump, and to make it negative for other candidates who were running for the president. In 2020, Zuckerberg was also called in to testify before Congress because of allegations of misinformation and election interference that resulted in President Biden being the winner. And what they found instead was that there was political involvement from another country, and that a country was again Russia, and it was also, it's for the second time, with Russia trying to interfere through messaging to make Trump seem more favorable and to make Biden seem less favorable. So in both instances, whether it was 2016 presidential election or 2020, we have analytical, objective, third-party evidence of where a social media platform in America was used to influence a presidential election. At that same time, for the 2020 investigation for misinformation for the presidential election, China was also investigated, and they were found to not have any actions that would have resulted in or had the appearance to result in election interference. So then we see that TikTok, which would be China, TikTok did not have any direct or appearance of influence for the 2020 elections, yet in 2020, Facebook was found liable, as was Facebook found liable in the 2016 presidential election. So we have significant proof of Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram being undeniably involved in harming our children and in influencing our elections. We don't have any such proof, although we do have the ability or the potential for TikTok to take our data and to exploit our privacy information. There's no proof of China having actually done that through TikTok, but we have ample evidence of Facebook and Instagram and Twitter having done so. Also, speaking of Twitter, the founder and CEO of Twitter is Jack Dorsey. He was also called in to testify about how his social media platform was used during the 2020 election, and he also was found evident of having had moderation of content, meaning he controlled what was being said and what was not being said, of information and misinformation to influence the 2020 election. Yet despite this, why is only TikTok being forced to sell itself or being threatened with a ban without any information to support those allegations, yet for Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, we are seeing those behaviors or those threats enacted? Is it because of Zuckerberg's wealth? That's the fourth concern. The Center for Tech and Civil Life announced in October of 2020 that Zuckerberg and his wife committed $350 million to help the group provide nonpartisan grants to election administrators who were having infrastructure complications due to the pandemic. The $350 million was spread throughout 2,500 jurisdictions during that year, and it gave them to both Republican and Democratic districts through the form of grants to help them cover the cost for administering the election. That means to monitor the polls, the equipment, the counting, etc. But of course, although it was allegedly dispersed through both parties, the grants provoked a significant amount of frustration and concern among individuals who thought that this huge amount of money from a person who was also known to be associated with election misinformation and content that could be swayed toward one party versus another. So because of this concern, an FEC complaint was filed. An FEC meaning Federal Election Commission. So an FEC complaint was filed by a Texas lawyer who claimed that the Center for Tech and Civic Life was given funds in a way that, quote, appeared to be designed with the intent to tilt the 2020 federal elections toward one political party. So because this FEC complaint was filed, then the FEC, which is compiled of commissioners, then the commissioners had to then sit and make a decision on, was this a violation for this huge $350 million to be given that directly went toward elections, with this person also having other abilities to influence an election. Now, throughout the history of the FEC, it has always been divided equally for commissioners from both sides of the party, meaning both Republicans and Democrats are equally represented on the FEC. And also historically, they have a hard time of ever making a general consensus or coming to a conclusion on any complaints that are brought toward them. However, for this legal complaint, the Federal Election Commission, the FEC, they voted unanimously to dismiss this complaint. And what they said in their ruling was, quote, in a 6-0 ruling, that is, that their, quote, was no reason to believe the nonprofit, Zuckerberg, or Chan committed any wrongdoing, end quote. So that's very convenient that we have a history of disagreeing, but when we receive a $350 million injection to help us with our job or to help us execute the election, then we can suddenly agree, and we also don't find any fault or any appearance of misinformation or trying to influence the election. So to sum all of our conversation, we see that we have ample evidence that Twitter and Facebook have directly and unequivocally had influence in their social media platforms that did interfere with the U.S. elections, with multiple U.S. presidential elections, and also in rendering children and youth vulnerable to online sexual exploitation. Although we have that evidence, we do not have the same proof of interference from TikTok. Again, we do have the potential, but we don't have any actual proof of them having done that. And under investigation, it was found that they have not had any election interference, nor was it found that China had any exploitation of our data as private U.S. citizens. So then we have to ask ourselves, what is the real reason for wanting to ban TikTok? Or maybe we should ask ourselves a different or maybe better question is, how come Congress has not banned Facebook, Twitter, Instagram from any of their actions, knowing that there was election interference? If we are going to have a government that cares for our safety and our online practices and privacy, then what is the reason for Congress having yet to put a Privacy Act for our whole country into place? We don't have that at all in our legislation to protect American citizens for online privacy safety and to prevent us from online safety invasions, which is why we often have so many attacks and computer hacks. So, if we were really caring about our citizens' safety online, then that should be global. We should not be able to have a company such as TikTok that has the potential to exploit or to render us harm because of their access to our citizen information or our private data. Likewise, we also should not have that vulnerability to our own US based social platforms. So it should be across the board that no one should have this ability. But when we see that there are companies that not only have the ability, but have found guilty of actually having rendered harm to our country and interfered with our elections, then a closer question or a closer examination would cause us to question, what is the difference? Why is there a disparity on us not being safe from all social platforms, whether they're in China or in America? Is it because Zuckerberg is a billionaire and gave over $300 million toward our US elections? Is it because Elon Musk, who in 2023 purchased Twitter for $44 billion and later named it X, which was a horrible marketing and branding decision, by the way. But anyway, is it because Elon Musk is also a billionaire and who, according to Trump, makes a monthly donation of $45 million to Trump's re-election campaign? In both instances, whether it's Elon Musk and Zuckerberg, we have a financial interest being evident in not only a political candidate, a presidential political candidate, but also having extremely large political donations to these candidates. We can see that there is money being earned by these platforms from the political ads being run on them. There is money being generated from people who are trafficking children and placing ads that are hidden signals to exploit or to traffic children. Yet these CEOs are able to continue their operations with only a congressional hearing, which is basically just talk and no action. They've had congressional hearings since 2016 with the same complaints against Facebook, against Instagram, against Twitter, and nothing has been done. But now there's immediate 12-month countdown legislation being proposed for TikTok to be banned. And I want to be clear that I am not in favor or advocating for TikTok, because I was actually banned on TikTok because of my arguments against pedophilia and children being vulnerable to this exploitation. So I'm not favoring them. I'm wanting us to think objectively and looking at all of the facts surrounding what is being done for one group of individuals and what's not being done for other individuals. And those other individuals just happen to be billionaires who significantly contribute to financial campaigns for political presidencies, who have significantly funded American governments and being able to execute our 2020 elections, and who also have significant control over social media messaging and social media content when it comes to election. Case in point, recently Kamala Harris was presumed to be the nominee for the Democratic Party for the 2024 presidential election after President Joe Biden declined to continue his re-election effort. And there was a large group calling themselves White Dudes for Harris who were pulling together money and advocating for white men to vote for Kamala Harris rather than for Donald Trump. And it just so happened to be on X/Twitter, which just so happened to be owned by Elon Musk, who just so happened to be a huge financial supporter of Trump, that caused the White Dudes for Harris account to be blocked and banned. So given all of these considerations and quote unquote coincidences, then we have to ask ourselves, whenever there is so much aggressive media pushing at the beginning of this year to ban TikTok, ban TikTok, ban TikTok. China is threatening our country. The China Communist Party is threatening your safety. That when any government, when any leader, political or corporate, when they use emotions to get you to act, they're really trying to manipulate your decisions by playing on your emotions. So going forward, whenever you hear very emotionally igniting language and messaging, whether it's from a political party for candidacy or elected officials who are already in office trying to pass a bill, then you have to also ask yourself, what is their motive for being so emotional and so extreme and wanting me to think a particular way or to make me act and behave to make a decision in a certain way? Look at how there was such immediate media attention for the ban of TikTok, and it was covering the airways. Yet now we get to the actual countdown time of the 2024 elections, and you're not hearing as much fire or anything about TikTok being a threat to our political or our presidential campaign. So if TikTok were really a threat to our democracy, if it were really a threat to our elections, why are individuals who are running for political office, including the office of the president, still on TikTok with paid ads promoting their campaigns and asking for your vote? Why are members of Congress also still on TikTok and asking for your vote if political content was so much of a threat because of China's potential invasion of our electoral mindsets and our political positionings? So, in this discussion, I hope you were able to see two things. One, if we can say that we need to have a ban on any social media, I do agree with TikTok. It's a censoring not only of business achievement and potential, but also freedom of speech. In saying that, it's also a question for us to consider if there is legislation being introduced for a single named entity or a single named group with allegations of the potential for harm. Should we also not expect our elected officials to put in actual action and actual bans for entities that have shown to do damage and interference on our American soil? And then the third point for that is then asking ourselves, if they're not doing anything about obvious evidence of election interference, what is the motivation or what are the self-interests that are being protected? And then the second major category I would like us to consider for our time together today is that whenever you have, especially with the government and with the media, whether it's social media, TV, live streaming news, if there is a constant message that is continually used to trigger your emotions, be very cautious and be very alert that they are trying to trigger your emotions to then manipulate your decisions or to manipulate your vote. So then try to look at multiple sources of information, not just the news, which can be controlled, but look at independent news sources, look at alternative social media sites to get a more comprehensive or more full view of what could be happening, rather than assuming that the people who are getting you so upset are doing so because they have a true, authentic concern for you. Because if you pull off the covers, you may see, well, if they really had a true concern for me or for my children or for my vote, then they will be taking action widespread and not selectively and not closing a blind eye when it benefits them. And also be mindful that they might be trying to get your emotions riled up to manipulate you to vote for or vote against something without realizing that within the proposed legislation, they sneakily hid in other legislation that might work against you or work against the very same thing that they are saying that they are enacting the legislation for. So, as always, I thank you so much for listening. I'm glad we were able to have these unbiased social issues conversations so that we can enlighten ourselves to make decisions that's best truly for us, our communities, and our families and our country, of course. And so, with us having that information, please consider sharing and enlightening, informing at least one other person about what we talked about today. And of course, these issues are sensitive. So, whenever you do have the conversation, remember to do so using science and love.
And if you run too fast,